Welcome to the Go Electric Fleet Show. This is where we sit down and chat about EV fleets, infrastructure, and more. Join us as we explore EV fleets here in BC. Earlier this year, we attended the Zero Emissions Fleets Reconnect conference right here in North Vancouver. There were tons of panel discussions and seminars that we got to look at, and here's just one of them: how to scale up fleets beyond pilot projects. Now, this one was moderated by Eve Howe, who's the Senior Manager of Policy Development and Decision Analysis at TransLink.
Thank you, Shannon, for that introduction. And so I'm going to be joined by a group of experts on our next panel, which will be talking about that transition from pilot project to full scale up. I'm with TransLink. You heard from Ralph this morning, one of our keynote speakers, and he talked a bit about our transformation. So we are very much in the midst of that transformation for our fleet. He talked about our history with electrification, our all-electric SkyTrain, our trolley buses, and he also talked about our targets, those ambitious targets, which are really pushing us towards this technology transition. So we did run a pilot back in 2019 where we had procured 4 battery electric buses on Route 100. They were from 2 different manufacturers. We had in-depot charging as well as on-route charging. And we learned a lot from that pilot. After that pilot in 2021, we ordered 15 new battery electric buses, which we take possession of this year. And we have lots of plans. I think Ralph touched on some of these. By 2027, we'll have completed our first all-electric transit center in Marpole, which will be equipped to serve 350 battery electric buses. And by 2030, we expect to have over 460 battery electric buses in service. By 2040, the entire bus fleet will be zero emissions. So we've started undergoing this transition. We're very much still in the pilot to scale up phase, but we're already learning a lot of lessons from this. And I think as the panel joins, we'll be able to talk about some of these lessons and share stories and commiserate maybe a little bit. One of the key challenges for TransLink is we're also undergoing this transition in a period of rapid growth. We'll be bringing on a lot more bus service as part of our Access for Everyone plan, including introducing bus rapid transit. So being squeezed on both ends, needing to grow, and then dealing with some of the challenges. So very quickly, I don't want to scoop too much of what the panelists will talk about, but some of the lessons we've already started learning is that infrastructure takes time. I think we heard a few panelists mention this. I think it was the first panel that had a lengthy discussion on municipal approvals. We're finding that it's to achieve a new bus depot is taking about 6 years to get through the whole process. As a result, another lesson is we need to be flexible in how we get to our greenhouse gas targets. We quickly realized that to meet our zero emissions targets, with the infrastructure and supply challenges, we needed to be flexible. And as such, we're looking at options including hydrogen fuel cells in some cases, but renewable diesel and renewable natural gas as kind of a bridging mechanism to get us to especially our short-term milestones. And then finally, the last lesson that we're starting to learn is that budgets need to adapt, especially going to scale. Higher capital costs and lower operating costs means you'll need to shift dollars around in ways that maybe your finance or accounting department isn't quite used to. So having that change in mindset is one of the lessons that we're starting to see. Those are a few highlights, but I'd like to introduce Evan Dacey, who is Branch Manager, Fleet Strategy and Asset Management from the City of Vancouver. Starting at the City of Vancouver in 2015, Evan took over managing the city's small fleet Mitsubishi i-MiEVs on the side of his desk, which I think is how many of us have started in this field. Since then, Evan has led major green fleet projects, including the city's first electric medium and heavy-duty vehicles and the use of renewable diesel and renewable natural gas in its vocational fleet. Now the manager of fleet engineering and asset management group, Evan oversees a team of 20 that embed green fleet practices into conventional fleet asset management work. So welcome, Evan.
So Vancouver has a strong history of being a leader in a variety of green or sustainability-focused areas. As part of our Greenest City 2020 plan work that we were doing in 2013, we started serious work to reduce our fleet emissions to hit a target of a 30% emissions reduction by 2020. So this work included a targeted focus on how we get ahead of the technology curve in fleet electrification. So today I want to highlight sort of how things have changed over the last decade. In 2013, we had 45 zero-emission vehicles, or ZEVs, in the city fleet. So that's about 2.5% of our fleet count at the time. Half of these were Mitsubishi i-MiEVs, and the other half were sort of assorted maintenance equipment like electric utility vehicles and our electric Zambonis. Range was a constant concern, and the applicable use cases were sort of few and far between. While I have a soft spot for the i-MiEV, it was not universally loved within the city, and staff were not particularly enthusiastic about driving them. But if we fast forward 5 years to 2018, with some luck and hard work, we managed to more than double the ZEVs in the fleet, surpassing the 100-unit mark. Almost all of this growth was adding Ford Focus EVs to replace end-of-life gas Focuses, but we also started replacing our forklifts with electric as well. Incentives started to be available. The relatively low cost of the Focus EV made the business case very bullish. Range was still a concern for some heavy driving staff, but we were able to find excellent use cases for jobs like site inspectors and non-emergency police work. The biggest selling point to staff was the single trim level available in the Focus EV, which meant things like heated leather seats and fancy radio systems with Bluetooth. 2019 to 2021 was a bit of a strange time for our work, and we sharpened our focus on innovation and strong business cases. So in 2019 and 2020, we rolled out our first 3 medium-duty electric vehicles. In 2020, we electrified a big portion of our bylaw and parking enforcement fleet. And then in 2021, we started electrifying our greens mowers for the city's golf courses. Exiting COVID and the corresponding sort of supply chain disruptions meant that 2022 and 2023 were our best years for growing the ZEVs in the city fleet. We grew our electric light-duty fleet by 80% and hit the 200 ZEV mark, which meant that 10% of our fleet is now electric. This includes our first electric pickup trucks and cargo vans that we've deployed into heavy, like boots-on-the-ground operational use cases. But we also saw major progress in some noteworthy medium and heavy-duty electric vehicle projects, such as our electric fire truck and our upcoming electric aerial trucks and refuse truck. So now we are heavily into the steep part of the technology S-curve, and we hope to again double the size of our light-duty electric fleet by the end of our current capital plan.
Great. Thanks, Evan. I'd like to invite David to come up next. So David McPhee is Manager of Climate and Environment at YVR. He has over 16 years experience helping BC organizations and companies set environmental targets and deliver programs that reduce their impact on the planet. As manager on the Climate and Environment team at YVR, he supports a team of environmental professionals that are helping the second busiest airport in Canada and its business partners reduce energy use while working towards their industry-leading goal of net zero carbon by 2030. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I don't have as many facts to share, so I'll just speak a little bit off the cuff about what we're trying to do at YVR. So as you mentioned, we do have a net zero by 2030 goal. A lot of that is very much focused on decarbonizing the largest building in British Columbia, which is the Vancouver International Airport. We're going to do that by basically bringing online one of the biggest geo-exchange well fields in Canada to completely heat and cool the terminal building. And that'll decarbonize a big percentage of our operations. But of course, we do have a lot of fleet out there. So I feel like we're not beyond the pilot phase. We're kind of endlessly piloting at YVR. Similar to City of Vancouver, we started with a lot of Ford Focuses. We've now started procuring Mazda MX-30s, which you see in that picture there. They don't necessarily have the range that you would see for people that are doing long highway commutes, which is perfect for us because we have kind of these short duty cycles and we have dedicated charging for our fleet. So you don't always have to get the biggest battery in the longest range. You really need to look at what your operational needs are and try and match that with what's available in the market. So for us, I think you use the term S-curve. It's the same thing when we get into the medium and heavy duty fleet. We're very much like BC, like TransLink, going through this transition phase of looking mostly at renewable diesel. Last year we purchased over 30,000 liters of renewable diesel, and this year we're transitioning to all of our marked diesel on the airfield will be renewable. So I think that really, for us, is changing the business case on, what is the cost to transition to other low carbon forms, because now instead of using, regular fossil diesel as a reference point, we're using a higher cost renewable diesel as kind of the base case for the operational cost of the vehicle. We're also kind of trying to get into I know this is very much a plug-in focused event, but we are getting into the hydrogen space as well. We purchased 2 Toyota fuel cell vehicles last year just to get a sense of how they operate. And luckily, we have a local hydrogen supplier just over the bridge from where we are at YVR. And then in the bottom right-hand corner there, you can see one of our Eco buses, we have quite a few of those. We bought a number right before the pandemic, not knowing what was going to happen to the airport world, but we still have them available for shuttling passengers from our remote stands to the main terminal and back. So we're still kind of learning about how to operate some of those larger pieces of electric vehicles in an airport environment. The other thing I'd say about pilots is we're really trying to experiment with what makes sense for installing EV charging infrastructure. I think in the early days, we kind of made the mistake of putting in a bunch of charging locations where we have people parked for long periods of time while they're on vacation. Not the best use of charging infrastructure. So now we're kind of refocusing our efforts on things like fast chargers to get people to move through the charging infrastructure and get the best use out of it. And we're also looking at things like our valet service, where we can actually have valet people moving the electric vehicles around and just making the best use of that charging infrastructure investment that we're making. The next slide is more just me speaking about the airfield and the airport environment in general. It's not just us out there that are driving around things on 4 wheels or more. There's quite a few other people that operate on Sea Island in the airport ecosystem. So in the top left corner there, that's a electric de-icing truck that is operated by Aeromag. So they're still using some diesel for heating the glycol that they spray on the aircraft when they're de-icing it, but they can run the engine on a fully electric battery system. That second picture from the left, that is the baggage tugs that you see all around the airfield, moving people's bags around. We have a lot of electric belt loaders that can move goods and baggage onto aircraft. We have a requirement that if you're operating and you have a license at YVR, you need at least 50% of your fleet have to be electric. And the airport provides the charging infrastructure today. So we have over 100 charging ports for the ground handling companies to use at YVR, which is great. And we're starting to see companies like Air Canada bring in much larger pieces of electric equipment. So they're really pushing the envelope on things like pushback tractors for large jumbo jets that are going to be electric soon. And yeah, I think this is the second time I've seen Purolator up today. So we've got delivery companies, we've got electric buses on Sea Island, and electric car rental companies. So again, it's really up to us as the airport to think about what kind of infrastructure do these companies need, how are you ensuring adequate power to where it's needed. So we're starting to re-envision ourselves less as a transportation hub, more of an energy hub, especially when we start to think about the future demands around aircraft. So electric planes are coming. It's not just a pipe dream. We have Harbour Air with their e-Beaver that they've been trialing. We had Helijet announce that they're going to be buying an essentially electric helicopter in the next few years. And then we have companies like Air Canada making these public commitments about bringing hybrid aircraft to YVR. So we are really starting to see this massive spike in energy demand with a lot of loads coming online around the same time. And we're trying to get out ahead of that and do a big kind of long-term planning exercise for what those future power needs are going to be at YVR. With aircraft probably being the biggest focus, but then also just the whole transportation sector on Sea Island and the movements of goods around Sea Island and to other parts of the province.
Thank you. Exciting to see all that's happening there. I'd like to invite up Matthew Rianto, who's General Manager at Fuse. At Fuse, Matthew oversees all credit reporting and transactions in Canada. Prior to this current role, he played a vital role at ChargePoint, where he managed the development, implementation, and reporting of the company's low-carbon fuel standard program offerings in Canada and the U.S. Matthew's foundation in the energy sector was solidified during a significant tenure at BC Hydro, where he served in various capacities, accumulating as an energy procurement professional. Welcome, Matthew.
Thanks, Eve. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Matt Rianto. I work for Fuse, and unlike my fellow panelists up here, we don't operate fleet. So we work with fleets. So we work with 400 plus fleet operators in the US and Canada. So what our company does is that we help company of all sizes to tap into the clean fuel programs or carbon credits. So this is the carbon credit stuff that you've been hearing throughout the day. So we focus on carbon credit management. Again, our company is technology focused. So we are a SaaS company. The difference between us and other carbon credit companies is that we provide our clients with software access. So that you get that visibility and confidence that you know what's happening behind the curtain. You know that you're getting the most out of your portfolio. and we're there to do the heavy lifting, essentially. So what is this clean fuel program? So we're blessed with 2 programs in Canada, actually. There are 2 programs, provincial BC and the federal program. So if you have assets, electrified assets, or electrifying your assets or sites in British Columbia, you're double blessed because you can get these you get to participate in these 2 programs. You can stack the credits and get double the benefit almost. So what is this program? So this program is implemented by provincial and federal government. Provincial, BC is Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. The intention is to reduce emission from the transportation sector. So if you operate a fleet of vehicles and you use fuels and you supply fuel, whether it's like high carbon fuel or low carbon fuel, you get either debits or credits in these 2 programs. Again, they have different goals, but the same idea, reducing emission from the transportation sector, 30% emission reduction for the provincial program, and 15% for the federal one. They go on an annual basis, so you have to report once a year, and this is an annually recurring revenue. So if you're electrifying your fleet or you're starting that journey, you need to take these 2 programs into account because the math will change. The ROI will look so much different than without taking them into account. Again, they are very lucrative, and our company is here to support if needed, but if not, that's great, but just look at them, essentially. So this is a little bit about what we do. Our parent company, they're called Momentum. They're based in Sacramento, California. They're in the clean tech funding sector. So how we started is because one of our parent company's clients, Amazon, came to us saying that, hey, we've heard about this clean fuel programs, low carbon fuel standard, carbon credits. How do we go about this? We have massive sites everywhere, all over the country. What should be our approach? And then our CEO back then took on the project and then handed over the blueprint for our client then. So, and then it clicked in our mind that, the company like Amazon, that size, was struggling with this program. There's got to be other folks who could use support from ours. So that's the background. With our software, you get those visibilities. You get to manage your portfolio, asset, equipment, all through one software. And it's just part of the whole service. This is the math that I was talking about. So utilizing carbon credits, it's going to change the way you calculate your ROI. Like a typical level 2 for light passenger fleet or vehicles, with 20,000 kilometers a year, you can roughly get 2,000 to 3,000 a year. Whereas for larger vehicles like shuttles, class 6 to 8, medium duty and heavy duty vehicles, with 60,000 kilometers per year, you'd get roughly $30,000 to $40,000 a year annually. And this is an annually recurring program, so it'll help bring down that total cost of ownership. So if you're an OEM, happy to partner up to help you give that benefits to your customers. So that's who we are. I'm looking forward to the convo, and thanks again.
Thanks, Matthew. And finally, last but not least, I'd like to invite Robert Safrada, CEO of Coast to Coast Experiences, to come join us. Oh, there you are. So Robert is redefining corporate leadership by seamlessly blending social purpose and climate responsibility. At the forefront of vehicle-to-grid technology in Canada, he organized Canada's first V2G pilot for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. Rob's commitment to environmental and social responsibility is evident in every facet of his business ventures, from the transportation industry to international tourism, and he's passionate to help business leaders understand that profit is enhanced when triple bottom line is maximized. Robert.
Good afternoon. So I guess I do this. Here we go. So I'm going to talk about something that you will all know about 5 years from now. And 7 to 10 years from now, you'll all be using and doing, and you'll know well. And the reason I'm going to talk about it is because it is the reason people like myself, who has a delivery business and a tour bus business, people in the school bus industry, other delivery people, the film industry, will be able to afford and run to buying medium and heavy duty electric vehicles. So I wonder if this has a thing. So this shows on the left the current electric system, and you see there's 3 dots at the top, and then it's pretty simple. There's it's like mainframes. When I was young with IBM, there were a few mainframes that had all the computing power. And then came along distributed computing, and that's what's going to happen with power. It's going to be distributed. Every truck, every car, electric in the future, will be a source of power for you in your home, in your office, in your factory, and to the grid. And guess what? That'll make the grid more resilient. So some of the extra dots here on the right to the evolving electricity, the main ones are storage. Okay? The main ones are storage, and that's why you'll know about this in the future. How do I do this? Here we go. So, this is from the Department of Energy a year ago, and I look mainly here. So these gray bars are $25 billion spent already in the United States on stationary storage, okay? To back up the grid and for emergency services, for solar, for wind, all that kind of thing. Those are the gray bars. But look, these red bars are 4 or 5 times higher. That's the amount of energy that's today, electric energy today available, sitting in electric vehicles doing nothing but driving them around, okay? So the previous slide, more storage. This slide, tremendous amount of money being invested in stationary storage. What do we do with these truck batteries when they're not being used? They're incredibly valuable. And in the future, people will pay you to use your battery when you're not using it. And when they pay you or me to use my battery when I'm not using it, that will allow me to buy large electric vehicles. This is another chart. I think at the top, you see why is it important for this to happen? Well, a lot less carbon going up into the air. By the way, who here has ever seen a ton of carbon or knows what it looks like? Me either. However, the next point is reduced air pollution. Someone's borrowing it. I usually carry around a portable air quality monitor. And I check where I am, what the air quality is like. And unless it's good, I leave. And if the air in here was bad, like danger, if it said danger, you'd be uncomfortable, you'd be able to see the number, and you wouldn't come back. You might even leave. So tailpipe emissions from cars, certainly, but especially large vehicles, makes you and I sick, kills people. So I try to bring it home and make it visceral to you yourself, because that I can understand, not necessarily a ton of carbon. And yes, I am not a climate change denier. So that's important. And large vehicles account for 40% of the air pollution, even though they're only 3% of the number of vehicles that we have, but they all drive 200, 300 kilometers a day. Vehicle to grid will make the grid more resilient, so you'll have millions of sources of power, not just 26 that we have in BC Hydro. And it'll save a lot of money for the grid as well. So we'll want some of that money. And point 3 is that money, they could give you a contract to use your battery from your vehicle, and therefore you can afford the vehicle. This chart below, I won't point to it, but trust me. So in the UK, they predicted that by 2050, they'll need 25 gigawatts more power than they have today, than they produce today, 25 gigawatts than they produce today, just to charge electric cars. We talked to the author, not even to do with trucks and other things. However, with vehicle to grid and smart charging, they'll need 5 gigawatts less, not more, less than they produce today. So it's efficiency. So this is not a nice to have, this is a must have, and it's worth it for utilities to be part of this and help us buy these electric trucks and buses. This last one is from in 2004, I'm bragging, by the way, if not every one of your companies uses Novex Courier, please switch now. Here's why. Because we did this in 2004. We were able to get our drivers into hybrid cars and out of the typical $3,000 beaters they drive today. And then we took the hybrid to the air care, and we compared the results of the hybrid versus the initial 20, and now we have about 45, I think, cars we took off the road. And you can see that hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, and NOx are down by essentially 99%. That's clean air not going in your body or lungs, making you sick. So for yourself, for your friends, for your family, use a company that has cleaner vehicles. It's very compelling. Oh, that's us. Thank you very much. And I believe there are some people from different municipalities, government here. And the ask is to learn about vehicle to grid, to identify land that can be used for charging and for giving energy back to the grid when it needs it, so that there's less carbon going into the air and there's cleaner air. Thank you very much.
So we have time for some discussion questions. So I'm going to start with the fleet folks, and then ask you, in that process of going from pilot to scale up, what are some of the key challenges? If you were to list like two, and maybe try not to list the same two, because I know there's probably a long list of things that you've encountered. What would you say are two of the challenges that you've had to face? And maybe starting with Evan.
Sure. So I wrote down some here, and I'll try and pick two that maybe others won't have encountered as much. One for us, it's a little bit weird. It's just sort of the changing nature of incentives. In the early days, we were pretty fortunate. There's still caps on incentives, but they were a little bit more flexible. Today, some of these incentive programs have fairly hard caps, which are great for pilot programs, but are kind of more challenging as you try and scale up. And so one of the things that we've started to do is sort of not include some of those incentives in our bigger business cases, because we buy 5 trucks, maybe we can get all the incentives. By 20 trucks, we can get incentives on some. And often as we start to scale up some of these replacement programs, these incentives disappear entirely. And so it's sort of things where business cases are really successful at first and then not so much later. And then the second one I would just sort of say is, as we start to scale up from pilot to large-scale deployment, EV infrastructure sort of doesn't scale linearly. As you go from robbing those free breakers on an existing panel to installing a new panel upstream to sort of installing an entirely new service, there's these big step changes, and often those can be the thing that sort of kill a business case.
Great. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. How about at YVR, David?
I'd say some of our challenges are similar, especially I would echo in terms of finding those easy open spaces on the panel, and then it becoming more and more higher cost when we reach these demand constraints. We're definitely facing that at the airport. Our building is kind of like a big Frankenstein building with many different additions that have been added years over year. So now we're looking at the whole infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, and we're trying to balance those needs of EV charging against other future electric needs to decarbonize many other aspects of our facility. So that's something we're looking at. I think, again, the time of charging, we are looking at fast chargers as being something that makes sense for us. But again, if you have electrical constraints, you don't necessarily have that full capacity available for fast charging. So we are doing a pilot right now with a local BC company called Moment Energy to have essentially retired EV batteries that are now creating a battery bank in a big shipping container, and they can kind of power up. You can trickle power to them over time, and then you can still have that fast power supply when you need to do those kind of level 3 fast charging events. I'd say the other thing that has been a challenge for us that we haven't necessarily figured out the solution to, a lot of our equipment is very specialized, and it needs to be able to operate on 24/7 cycles in some cases, especially if we have things like big snow events. So now we're looking at, from a capital investment standpoint, do we need to go buy 2 of them so that one of them is sitting there charging while the other one's in operation? So I don't know if battery swapping is something that might come down the road, but there's got to be a solution that can prevent us from just having to buy 2 of everything.
Great, thanks. I mean, the duty cycle is definitely a challenge for us at TransLink as well. How about you, Robert, from your experience?
I'm not going to repeat. We've experienced those things too, and I agree wholeheartedly. A little bit adding is that the unanticipated benefits of having electric vehicles in your fleet, we find that when we have them in our fleet, we get the best drivers. They stay longer. Our turnover at our courier company, the average turnover in the industry for local same day is about 35 to 40% annually. Ours is 5 to 7%. We take some of that money that we would spend in hiring, training, and the inefficiencies of the first 6 months, and we help them pay for that electric or hybrid vehicle they've shown up with. So the unanticipated benefits are marvelous. The other people in our business are very proud that our company does that. So we get better resumes, and people are the real power in any business. So the electric vehicles help with that. The other thing I'd want to say, just call me Mr. V to G, is that with a charger, the infrastructure is a cost. With a bidirectional V to G charger, it's a revenue source. So it completely changes the dynamic in the future.
That's very interesting that there's actually opportunities that maybe you didn't anticipate in terms of the labor savings from what you described. Maybe to Matthew, you've talked a bit about the credit market and how that can help return on investment. How are you seeing that play out in the pilot to scale up process?
That's a great question. So some lessons learned that I can share from our experience and both U.S. and Canada. Referring to U.S. because California is the first carbon credits market in North America. It's the most mature, and other carbon credits markets normally follow what California is doing, learn from their mistakes, and then hopefully do better. So what we've learned is that you've got to take a look at your fleet and do your charging infrastructure planning properly for the longer term. So one fleet that we are helping right now, based in Canada, they have over 200 electrified vehicles like transit buses, trucks. They have their fleet depot, but the problem is that their charging infrastructure, they have non-network chargers, or what you call them like level 1 or dumb chargers. And the problem with that is that it's already hard once you've put that infrastructure in the ground and trying to dig it up afterward. It's going to be quite costly. And the second thing is that there are standards that you need to meet if you were to tap into this carbon credit market. You cannot report from just a level 1 charger, so they have to essentially upgrade those infrastructures. There's some lessons learned. The other thing would be a capital. The market is evolving with carbon credit now coming into the play. There are options for you to consider if you're municipalities or fleet operators. There are companies who can offer you forward financing in exchange for your carbon credits. We can help you with that as well, but there are other options in the market. So do your due diligence is what I would say.
Great, thanks. So that kind of, what you're just describing, doing some of the planning ahead, leads me to this next question. Given your experience, and in some cases over a decade of experience in this space, there are folks here who are probably just at the beginning stages and looking to pilot and start out. What advice would you give someone starting out on this process today? And whoever wants to start first.
I would say put trackers in the vehicles that you have now, get a better sense of how long they're sitting idle, where they're sitting idle, the path that they travel, especially if you've got, like us, we've got a very constrained environment that they operate in. They're not just out driving around on roads. And that'll give you a lot of insight into where your power needs need to be tomorrow and which vehicles to prioritize for electrification. You don't want to be, making those big investments in vehicles that have, short bursts of needs but are sitting idle for long periods of time.
So collect data on your existing fleet before you undertake the process. Anyone else?
Sure, I can go. Yeah, so one thing that we found particularly crucial, especially I kind of mentioned, we started with IMEVs, and that process was very top-down led. It was, here's 25 IMEVs, a place for them to work. As we sort of did future early stage pilot work, we really did bottom up work. So, we engaged with each of the different sort of business units and understood the ones that were excited to go electric or could kind of see the benefit of it versus where there was a lot of hesitancy, and tried to really aim the limited capital dollars we had to those groups that were excited. And then it sort of becomes this cycle of you have users that are using the vehicles that like them, that kind of spreads through other groups. And we found it a lot easier in second and third waves when you had advocates within the city instead of sort of opponents within the city.
So building out a culture from those who are already excited about it, because that's important too, getting buy-in internally. Anyone else?
If those folks haven't had a carbon audit done in their business, I would suggest they do that. And there are many groups now that will help you do that. It's not that expensive. And the reason I say that is that often you will see that the vehicles you have is the biggest polluting you're making. It might not be, but it'll give your company, it'll help the other associates understand where you're polluting and where you can make the biggest difference. And that kind of thing, I find, usually gains enrollment of others to say, oh, well, yes, this is important, not just a couple people. And I certainly wouldn't yet suggest that anyone go whole hog. If you need 10 or 20 eventually, just go for success. Start with one, get comfortable with it, learn more about it, and also find the people that we have here and that are in the community that can help you, because it's complicated and it's not our business. We use some of these folks here. We're a courier company in a tour bus industry, and we use advisors because there's a lot going on and moving.
Lots of great advice there.
I'd like to add, echo what David was saying earlier. Get to know your data, what your fleet is doing right now, how many kilometers are they running in a year. That can help you calculate. Again, speaking from the carbon credit perspective, that can help you calculate or estimate the revenue that you can get from electrifying your fleet. Again, this is coming from your charging infrastructure. Just a rough idea, from the provincial program, you can get roughly 40 to 45 cents per kilowatt hour per year. That's just from the provincial program, whereas the federal program, if you're in BC, with the federal program, it really depends on where you are. If your province is producing like clean electricity, thanks to BC Hydro, in BC we've got good score. So like you can get roughly like 20 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas like other places might be half or somewhere in between. So again, get to know your data and calculate how much ROI you'll get out of like electrifying your fleet. And echoing what Robert was saying earlier, it's just like a community effort. It's a team effort. What I find most of the time is that this kind of like program is being kept a secret, or like a secret sauce for some companies. They don't really want to share with their peers because they feel like, oh, if there's more and more like companies generating carbon credits, like the supply of carbon credits will be more than the demand and the price will go down. It doesn't work that way necessarily. It's not just electricity. In California, electricity only makes about 10% of the whole carbon credit pool. It's a low carbon fuel standard, so it's not just electricity. There are other kind of like low carbon fuels as well. So just work together as a community and let's get to the finish line together, sort of thing.
Great, thanks. I think we have time for maybe one more question. So this is kind of a big one. So I think we can all agree that government has played a pretty important role in getting this industry going and, and incentivizing and prompting. And I think we heard about this in the first panel with some of the key things that government has done. If you could say, what is the thing that government has gotten the most right and where they could improve the most going into the future? Like, where are there sort of areas of improvement that government could focus on? What would you say they are? So, done right, room for improvement. And whoever wants to go first, go for it, Evan.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that the biggest thing that's been done right, and I won't talk about local government, I'm just kind of thinking kind of like senior government levels here, is really recognizing the importance of this up front and then sort of not wavering on the importance of it. You know, I think one of the things we're really fortunate in BC is that we've been able to kind of continue this culture of this work being important for like well over a decade now, without having to worry about sort of that direction doing kind of a 180. Where I would say the biggest sort of area for improvement is, you know, ultimately, if we want to make change fast, barriers have to be reduced. And I think, frankly, the easiest way to do that is just make sure that money is getting to entities that can actually buy these vehicles and put them on the road with, you know, the necessary logistics to kind of safeguard it, but really without sort of as much headache so that groups see it as a barrier, but instead see it as an opportunity.
So administrative simplicity, things like that?
Yeah, just really how can we sort of turn up the fire hose of money that makes these projects possible? Because right now, and whether that is just turning capital dollars into operating dollars, we know in our fleet there's a total cost of ownership savings, but a 40 or 50 or 150% capital increase, and that's a really hard barrier to overcome. So the more you can reduce that, I think the faster we can see these vehicles on the road.
That makes sense. David?
I think for us, what they've done right is there's been a broad range of incentives and different programs offered. It's not just a one-size-fits-all solution. So we've made use of special use vehicle incentives because we have special use vehicles at the airport. We've made use of federal incentives for charging infrastructure. And for that Moment Energy project that I mentioned, that's using an innovation fund from the province of BC. So we've been able to kind of repurpose and use a lot of different programs out there to achieve what we want to. In terms of what they could do better, I don't know if this is a government problem. It's more of a jurisdictional problem. I think in British Columbia, we are competing with other markets like California, and we want to be able to adopt some new technologies early, but we kind of fall to the bottom of the list when it comes to suppliers because we don't have the same buying power as some of these other jurisdictions. So I think there's an opportunity for industry and regions like to work together and kind of look at what is our collective need. We're all probably trying to buy the same thing anyway, so can we create sort of like a buyer's club across many different operators, whether it's City of Vancouver and YVR working together, and just having more of that purchasing power to be able to be in the market early and early adopting when there's limited supply of some special use vehicles.
So maybe almost a bit of a coordination role to help us have more leverage. Matthew?
I would say the fact that we have a federal or nationwide clean fuel program, comparing it to what they have in the States, our federal government is doing a really good job there. It's like gathering the nation together towards the same goal, emission reduction of 15% by 2030. In the States, there are more and more states coming up, but they don't have like a nationwide program like what we have here. It's an issue because like when there's another jurisdiction that provides a better incentive for this fuel supplier, they might change things around. So that's an issue. So that's credits to our federal government, whereas like for the provincial government, they've been more agile, I would say, than the federal counterpart because they take feedback, they implement changes right away. The latest changes to the BC low carbon fuel standard starting this year for next year's reporting is that they now allow credit reporting for off-road vehicles. So it's not just your typical like passenger, light-duty, heavy-duty vehicles. It's also like off-road, electrified battery-powered vehicles. Mining sector, for airports like GSE, material handling equipment, if you have containerized units, you can report for credit. So that's great because like they emit like tons of CO2, and we know that. So it's just props to our provincial government for that. And for the federal, it's more so like to be more agile in a say it's my feedback.
I think if there are provincial folks here, I mean, definitely take note. How often does provincial government get kudos for being nimble and flexible and quick? So yeah, great job on that. How about you? What do you think?
Again, I'll try to be additive. So yes, I think they've been responsive, and the grants have made a huge difference for those who are getting started, and including things like being able to drive in the HOV lanes. I mean, there's what tools do the governments have, and I like that one. It's not a money one. However, the one where anyone here, whether you're government or not, I still think they really need to improve how they spend their money to purchase things. So, if they're supporting our good friend Sheldon Rideout of the Silent Gardener out there, to hire him for their gardener, he only uses electric and manual labor. If they're using Novex Courier, I have to say that again, people that are on the stage, people that are around the stage, that Fairwear, we have one of the early ones, we have their badges today. Those aren't purchased, those are rented from Fairwear. So Fairwear, if you're buying any swag to give out to your customers and associates, Fairwear is the best. So I think the purchasing dollar, how we spend our money, and especially governments, is key. So hopefully that's additive.
Great, thank you. So I'm sure folks have questions for some of these folks, and hopefully you'll stick around for a little bit longer. But I just wanted to thank you for joining and for sharing your knowledge. Thanks, everyone.
Hey there. Thanks for joining us on the Go Electric Fleet Show. Please like and subscribe for more content about electric vehicle fleets in British Columbia and beyond.